There's a specific moment that happens in the life of anyone trying to build something online. It's not when they
Wow,
quit
look at
their
all this
job.
treasure.
It's not
I'm
when
getting
they get
closer
their
to the
first
big
customer.
prize.
It's
Almost
not even
there.
when they hit some arbitrary revenue milestone they set for themselves. It's the moment they realize the game they thought they were playing isn't actually the game at all. For most people, that moment arrives somewhere around $1,000 a month. And what makes it so disorienting is that $1,000 feels like proof. Proof that it works. Proof that you're onto something. Proof that scaling from here is just a matter of doing more of what got you to this point. Except it's not. The math that gets you to $1,000 a month will actively fight you past it. The systems that felt sustainable at $900 will collapse at $3,000. And the version of you that celebrated crossing 4 figures is about to meet a version of the business you didn't design for and weren't expecting. This isn't about motivation. It's about structure. And the reason so many people stall out right after their first good month isn't because they lack discipline or vision. It's because they don't understand what actually changes. So let's talk about what happens after the first $1,000 month. Not the Instagram version, the structural version. And if you want to understand how money actually works at every stage of building something, hit subscribe. We break down the systems nobody talks about every single week. Here's what $1,000 a month usually looks like when you break it down. Let's say you're running a service business. Freelance writing, design, consulting, coaching, something like that. At $1,000 a month, you're probably charging somewhere between $200 and $500 per client. Maybe you've got 2 to 5 clients. You're managing everything yourself. The marketing is mostly word of mouth or a few posts on LinkedIn or Twitter that happen to connect. You send invoices manually. You manage projects through a combination of email threads, Google Docs, and sheer memory. It's chaotic, but it's yours. And critically, it fits inside your existing life. You can still work your day job. You can still respond to clients at night. You can still deliver everything on time because the volume is manageable and the expectations are loose enough that a slight delay doesn't break trust. $1,000 a month in this model feels like free money. Because in a way, it is. You're not paying for software. You're not running ads. You're not outsourcing. Every dollar that comes in is almost pure margin minus taxes minus maybe a Zoom subscription. The problem is that this model has a ceiling. And the ceiling isn't about effort. It's about time. If you're trading hours for dollars, even at a premium rate, there's a maximum number of hours you can sell before something breaks. Your health, your relationships, your day job, the quality of the work itself. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most people don't hit the ceiling because they run out of hours. They hit it because they run out of the kind of hours that generate new clients. Let's run the numbers. Say you're billing 20 hours a week at $50 an hour. That's $1,000. But 20 billable hours doesn't mean 20 hours of total work. It means 20 hours you can invoice for, plus the time spent finding clients, answering emails, fixing revisions, managing deadlines, posting content, updating your portfolio, learning new tools, dealing with the administrative debris that comes with being a one-person operation. You're probably working 30 to 35 hours a week on the business total. And that's on top of everything else. Now let's say you want to double your revenue, $2,000 a month. You'd assume you just need to double your client load, right? 4 to 10 clients instead of 2 to 5. But watch what happens. 10 clients means 10 separate communication threads, 10 different project timelines, 10 invoices, 10 onboarding conversations, 10 sets of expectations. The complexity doesn't double. It multiplies. Suddenly you're spending more time managing clients than doing the work they're paying you for. You start missing details. A deadline slips. A client gets frustrated. You overcompensate by working later, waking up earlier, saying yes to everything because you're afraid that if you slow down, the momentum disappears. And here's the trick. You might actually hit $2,000 a month this way, for a while, but you won't be able to hold it, because what breaks first isn't your energy. It's your attention. At $1,000 a month, you can keep everything in your head. You know who needs what and when. You remember the details of each project without needing a system. 2,000, you can't anymore. This is where people make the first critical mistake. They try to solve a structural problem with personal effort. They think if they just get better at time management or wake up earlier or batch their work more efficiently, they can push through. But you can't optimize your way out of a design flaw. The business you built to get to $1,000 a month wasn't designed to scale. It was designed to exist. And existence and growth require completely different infrastructure. Here's what actually needs to change. First, you need systems. Real ones. Not a to-do list. Not a notebook. You need a CRM, a project management tool, automated invoicing, templated onboarding, a content calendar, email sequences. Something that takes the recurring decisions out of your head and puts them into a process someone else could theoretically follow. Most people resist this. It feels corporate. It feels like overkill. You're not a company, you're just a person with a side thing. But that's the identity trap. As long as you think of yourself as a person with a side thing, you'll build a business that behaves like a side thing. Which means it'll stay small, fragile, and exhausting. Second, you need to change your pricing. Not because you deserve more, but because the economics of small transactions don't work at scale. If you're charging $300 per client and you want to make $5,000 a month, you need 17 clients. 17 individuals who each need something different, on different timelines with different levels of urgency and expectation. If you're charging $3,000 per client, you need 2. The emotional resistance to raising prices is real. You worry you'll lose everyone. You worry you're not good enough yet. You worry that the market won't bear it. But here's the thing. The market you're currently serving won't bear it. Because you found them by being cheap. The clients who will pay $3,000 aren't browsing the same places as the clients who'll pay $300. They're not price shopping. They're looking for a specific outcome, fast with minimal risk. And they're willing to pay for certainty. Which brings us to the third thing that has to change. The offer itself. At $1,000 a month, your offer is probably vague. I do freelance writing. I help people with marketing. I build websites. Vague works at low volume because the friction is low. Someone needs a thing, you seem capable, the price is reasonable, they hire you. But vague doesn't scale. Because vague doesn't create urgency. It doesn't create specificity. And it doesn't give someone a reason to choose you over the 16 other people who also do marketing. The businesses that break past the early ceiling do so by collapsing their offer into something uncomfortably specific. Not I do websites, but I build 5-page websites for law firms that need to start ranking on Google within 60 days. Not I do consulting, but I help SaaS companies reduce churn in their first 90 days by auditing onboarding and fixing the 3 drop-off points that kill retention. Specificity sounds limiting, and it is. You're turning away potential clients by being clear about who you're for. But the trade-off is that the people you are for can find you, understand you, and pay you faster. And they'll pay more because they're not buying hours. They're buying a solved problem. So let's say you do all that. You build systems. You raise prices. You narrow your offer. You start charging $2,000 or $3,000 per engagement instead of $200 or $300. Congratulations. You've just created a different problem. Because now the question isn't whether you can deliver. It's whether you can sell. At $300, selling is easy. The risk is low. The decision is fast. People say yes because it's easier than saying no. At $3,000, selling is a process. You need to build trust. You need to demonstrate expertise. You need to overcome objections. You need to show proof that you've done this before, that the outcome is real, that the investment makes sense. This is where content becomes non-negotiable. Not content for the sake of posting. Content as a trust-building engine. Writing that shows you understand the problem better than the client does. Case studies that prove you've solved it before. Frameworks that make a complex decision feel simple. And here's the part nobody tells you. Good content takes time. So now you're stuck. You need to create content to generate leads. But creating content takes time away from billable work, which means your income dips in the short term, which makes you panic, which makes you stop creating content and go back to hunting for clients the old way. And the cycle repeats. Because now the question isn't whether you can deliver. It's whether you can sell. At $300, selling is easy. The risk is low. The decision is fast. People say yes because it's easier than saying no. At $3,000, selling is a process. You need to build trust. You need to demonstrate expertise. You need to overcome objections. You need to show proof that you've done this before, that the outcome is real, that the investment makes sense. This is where content becomes non-negotiable. Not content for the sake of posting. Content as a trust-building engine. Writing that shows you understand the problem better than the client does. Case studies that prove you've solved it before. Frameworks that make a complex decision feel simple. And here's the part nobody tells you. Good content takes time. So now you're stuck. You need to create content to generate leads. But creating content takes time away from billable work, which means your income dips in the short term, which makes you panic, which makes you stop creating content and go back to hunting for clients the old way. And the cycle repeats. Because now the question isn't whether you can deliver. It's whether you can sell. At $300, selling is easy. The risk is low. The decision is fast. People say yes because it's easier than saying no. At $3,000, selling is a process. You need to build trust. You need to demonstrate expertise. You need to overcome objections. You need to show proof that you've done this before, that the outcome is real, that the investment makes sense. This is where content becomes non-negotiable. Not content for the sake of posting. Content as a trust-building engine. Writing that shows you understand the problem better than the client does. Case studies that prove you've solved it before. Frameworks that make a complex decision feel simple. And here's the part nobody tells you. Good content takes time. So now you're stuck. You need to create content to generate leads. But creating content takes time away from billable work, which means your income dips in the short term, which makes you panic, which makes you stop creating content and go back to hunting for clients the old way. Congratulations. And the cycle repeats. You've just created a different problem. Here's what the bet looks like. You take 1 month, maybe 2, and you stop optimizing for revenue. You build the infrastructure. You write the content. You design the offer. You set up the systems. You raise your prices and you commit to only taking clients at the new rate, even if that means saying no to people who would have paid the old rate. Your income will probably drop, maybe significantly, and this is where most people break, because it feels like moving backward, feels reckless. It feels like you're sacrificing something real for something theoretical. But the alternative is staying in the gap forever. And the gap is designed to exhaust you. The people who break through are the ones who understand that the dip isn't failure. It's transition. You're not losing momentum. You're changing infrastructure. And infrastructure costs before it pays. Let's talk about what happens if you make it through. You're now charging $3,000 to $5,000 per client. You've got systems in place. You've narrowed your positioning. You're creating content that brings inbound leads. You've built enough trust that people reach out to you instead of you reaching out to them. Your monthly revenue is somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. You've quit your job or you're about to. This is the dream, right? Not quite, because now you're facing a different ceiling. And this one's psychological. At $10,000 a month, you're making 6 figures a year. You're doing it alone. You're proof that the internet works, that the old model is broken, that you don't need a boss or a company or venture capital to build a life. But you're also maxed out. You're working 50, 60 hours a week. You're the bottleneck in every process. Every client still needs you specifically. You can't take a vacation without revenue stopping. You can't get sick without projects stalling. You've built a job. A well-paid, flexible, autonomous job. But a job nonetheless. And the question becomes, is that enough? For some people, yes. Absolutely. 100,000 a year working for yourself on your own terms, with no ceiling on your upside if you're willing to grind. That's the goal. That's freedom. But for others, this is where the next transition starts. Because if you want to go further, if you want to build something that works without you, you need to make a choice that feels even more dangerous than the first one. You need to hire. Here's why hiring is terrifying at this stage. Let's say you bring on a contractor or a part-time assistant to handle admin work, client communication, basic project tasks. You're paying them $2,000 or $3,000 a month, which means your $10,000 month just became a $7,000 month. And unlike the dip you took when you were building systems, this dip doesn't end in 2 months. It's permanent. As long as you have that person on your team, your take-home is lower. You're betting that by freeing up your time, you'll be able to generate more revenue. But there's no guarantee. What if you hire someone and the leads dry up? What if they're not as good as you at the work? What if clients notice the difference and leave? Most people don't hire until they're desperate, until they're so underwater that they have no choice. And by then, they're hiring from a place of panic, not strategy. The ones who scale hire early, before it feels comfortable. They accept the margin hit because they know that their time is the limiting reagent, and the only way to grow is to buy it back. But here's the darker truth. Even if you hire well, even if you build a team, even if you scale to 50 or 100,000 a month, you've just created a different set of problems. Now you're managing people. Now you're responsible for their livelihoods. Now you've got payroll, taxes, compliance, onboarding, training, culture, performance reviews. You started this whole thing to escape a system, and now you're building one. And the question that most people don't ask until it's too late is, what are you actually building toward? Because if the goal is freedom, there's a point where more revenue doesn't give you more freedom. It gives you more responsibility. If the goal is impact, there's a point where scaling means you're further from the work that made you fall in love with it in the first place. If the goal is wealth, there's a point where a service business caps out and you need to build a product, which is a completely different. The first $1,000 month makes you think the path is linear, that you just keep doing more of what's working and eventually you get to where you want to go. But the path isn't linear. It's a series of transformations. And each one requires you to abandon the identity that got you there. So here's what nobody tells you about the first $1,000 month. It's not the beginning. It's the end of the easy part. The early days are hard because you don't know if it'll work. But once you cross that threshold, once you prove it's possible, the hardness changes shape. Now it's not about whether you can do it. It's about whether you can sustain it. Whether you can systematize it, whether you can let go of control, whether you can make decisions that hurt in the short term for the possibility of something bigger in the long term. And most people can't. Not because they're not smart enough or driven enough, but because they don't realize the game changed. They keep playing by the rules that got them to 1,000, and they wonder why they can't get to 10. The ones who break through are the ones who see the transitions coming, who build infrastructure before they need it, who raise prices before they're comfortable, who hire before it makes sense, who treat the business like a system, not an extension of themselves. And even then, there's no guarantee, because the internet is full of people who made it to 5,000 a month and burned out, who made it to 20,000 and hated what they'd built, who made it to 100,000 and realized they'd rather be doing something else. The first $1,000 month feels like validation, and it is. But what it's validating isn't that you've figured it out. It's that you're ready for the next test. If this breakdown helped you see the game differently, subscribe. We're mapping out every stage of what it actually takes to build something that lasts. New video